This is coming out of Psalm 37, it's verses 31 through 33. The righteous shall possess the land and dwell in it forever. The mouth of the righteous utters wisdom, and their tongue speaks what is right. The law of their God is in their heart, and their footsteps shall not falter. And then it says, use your God-given wisdom to speak what is right today. The hard part of that was knowing what's right and hearing God's wisdom. Okay. I meant to make copies for y'all. I've forgotten. I'll do it next week. I want to show you this book. I have one at home, and it is a Bible timeline. And the people that put it together, I mean, you literally can stretch it out for, all the way across the room. People that put it together read the Bible, and especially the Old Testament is what I find. And it's got one color for Israel, a darker gold for Judah, one color for Egypt, one for Assyria or Babylon. And so you can follow across time what each one of those countries was doing. And so what I did, since we were talking about Isaiah, I went through and just picked out some stuff. I also picked out stuff about David and when Israel became a country and when it broke apart and all that stuff. But I was interested in the prophet Isaiah, since that's what we're studying, and having the timelines. And the only thing that really caught my eye was that in 733, Isaiah withdrew from public life because of King Ahaz's alliance with Assyria. So, we keep thinking that, the Assyrians and the Romans and all these people are evil and we don't want anything to do with them. Throughout history, Israel and or Judah made treaties with these people and invited them in, not realizing that by doing so, they were bringing in their own conquerors. And so Isaiah was so upset when this happened that he quit prophesying for 17 years. Now, he doesn't talk about, that's not in the book of Isaiah. So whoever did this got it from, some of the history books. And then in 716, he begins to speak publicly again. And then in 711, Isaiah walks naked through Jerusalem as a sign that Assyria will defeat and shame Egypt. So, history that we get from other parts of the Bible that Isaiah doesn't talk about because he's just delivering God's message. But they...
As the first streaker.
Yeah.
As the first streaker.
Yeah.
So
But Adam and Eve were the first streakers.
be concerned
They didn't know it.
that Assyria was going to humiliate Egypt.
Well, just saying that was just a prophecy. So I've got the citation. We can look it up some other time. We aren't there yet.
Ronnie, all children straight.
Okay, so I am starting with chapter 9, verse 1b. And the book that we're using is called the section A Sign of Hope. So if I could get somebody to read, okay, this is chapter 9, starting with the second half of verse 1 through the end of verse 7.
Yeah, I've got it.
Okay.
The land of the tribes of Zebulun and Naphtali was once disgraced, but the future will bring honor to this region, from the Mediterranean eastward to the land on the other side of the Jordan, and even to Galilee itself, where foreigners live. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. They live in a land of shadows, but now the light is shining on them. You have given them great joy, Lord. This is like a psalm, by the way. Okay, you have given them great joy, Lord. You have made them happy. They rejoice in what you have done, as people rejoice when they are when they harvest grain, or when they divide captured wealth. For you have broken the yoke that burdened them, and the rod that beat their shoulders. You have defeated the nation that oppressed them and exploited your people, just as you defeated the army of Midian long ago. The boots of the invading army and all their blood-stained clothing will be destroyed by fire. A child is born to us, a son is given to us, and he will be our ruler. He will be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. His royal power will continue to grow. His kingdom will always be at peace. He will rule as King David's successor, basing his power on right and justice from now until the end of time. The Lord Almighty is determined to do all of this. You want me to read any more?
No, stop there.
Yes, ma'am.
So where do we hear this verse?
Christmas during Advent.
Christmas, yeah.
Yes.
Of course, Isaiah was not prophesying the coming of Christ. This kid had already been born. You know, according to one of my commentaries, I think I told y'all I have a Jewish translation of the Bible, and that commentator made the statement in the commentary was that, you know, Christians frequently use this as foretelling of the coming of Christ, but he said Isaiah was not talking about Christ. This kid had already been born, and he was just saying that God is going to do this in the history of Judah here and now, you know, within the next few decades when this kid grows up.
Who was the king?
Was
Was it David?
no, because
No.
David's been dead.
He's
David
dead. David's
lived
been
Will reign on
300.
David's throne.
Oh,
Yeah, just-
okay, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, yeah, and I don't, let me see if I wrote that.
Well, the Jewish Bible would say that.
Well, yeah, right. And the funny thing is, that even the Jews, when they study their Bible, as they go through time, they'll reinterpret things for where they are right now in history. So, you know, so it's kind of ironic when they go, I don't know what's wrong with those Christians, they do it too.
Well, it's weird though, that they say of whoever this person is, that he will be named Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father. I mean, that's not, I can't see the Jewish people ascribing the name Mighty God to even somebody as important
Well,
as David.
Mighty God may be a Christian take on something.
Okay.
Because, I think even, I don't remember if this guy or the other guy, said that, see, this guy says warrior God,
Okay, that's very different.
yeah, and that it could be a
The
God
original's
warrior.
been manipulated to
Okay,
satisfy a
yeah,
certain,
Right,
that's very different.
a certain predetermined
yeah,
time.
yeah,
So we'll make this fit this.
Everybody
Right.
doesn't do
yeah,
It was manipulated.
translation. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, so some notes that I had, on that passage. A child has been born to us. The child who is born with wondrous qualities and who is to assume leadership is the ideal king, and he will be strong against the enemies and establish an enduring reign of peace. Leadership is on his shoulder, and the fact that leadership is on his shoulders is, reverses the, yoke of oppression.
Mhm.
So you've got that literary, comparison there. The way that the Jewish translators, wondrous counselor, divine warrior, eternal father, prince of peace. And he says, you know, this string of epithets has been associated by many generations of Christian commentators and readers with Christ. What the prophet has in mind, however, is not messianic, except in the strictly political sense. He envisions an ideal king from the line of David who will sit on the throne of Judah and oversee a rule of justice and peace. This most challenging epithet in the sequence is warrior God. The prophet would be violating all biblical usage if he's calling the Davidic king God. And so that term is best construed here as some type of intensifier.
Well, that was my
Yeah.
question. I just don't think
No,
the Jewish
they
people
wouldn't
would have called person God.
Okay, so that's all of that section. Any other comments, questions? Okay, would somebody read verses 8 through 12?
I can do that.
Okay,
The Lord sent a word against Jacob, and it fell on Israel, and all the people knew it, Ephraim and the inhabitants of Samaria. But in pride and arrogance of heart, they said, the bricks have fallen, but we will build with dressed stones. The sycamores have been cut down, but we will put cedars in their place. So the Lord God raised adversaries against them and stirred up their enemies, and the Arameans on the east and the Philistines on the west. And they devoured Israel with open mouth. For all this, his anger has not turned away. His hand is stretched out still. Is that where you want me to stop?
Yeah. This translation in chapter 9 says with loftiness and big-headedness. Repeat what yours was, what the people were,
Let's see,
the last part of chapter, verse 9.
9, sorry. And all the people knew it, but in pride and arrogance of heart, they said.
Okay. Pride and arrogance of heart. Loftiness somehow to me doesn't equate to pride.
No,
That's a strange.
yeah.
Yeah. I get arrogance. The part about the bricks and the stone, this is probably an allusion to the Tower of Babel. That was a byword for overwhelming people pride, human pride. The Israelites go beyond the builders of the tower in their pride and their swelling heart by resuming their task of building after the brick has been torn down, thinking that they can make it bigger and better. So being very arrogant here. And replacing the fig trees with cedars, at that time and place, the cedar tree was the biggest tree they knew. So again, their arrogance.
And yours said sycamore?
Mine said, yeah, that the sycamores have been cut down, but we will put cedars in their
You
place.
said sycamores first. Sarah said sycamores first. She just-
Okay,
But
That
mine
was
says
a-
fig, mine says fig.
Yours says fig?
Huh?
well, mine says sycamore figs.
Uh-huh.
Sycamore fig, I'm not sure what kind of
How
tree
about
that is.
I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, look that up.
That's
Sycamore
figs.
Yeah,
Maybe they were meaning both trees.
And we've got it hyphenated.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, so it's
I
like.
never heard of a sycamore fig.
Entirely different.
and then in verse 12, divine wrath has not turned back, means that it has not relented. Where there's kind of a wordplay in Hebrew here, where turned back means to repent or to turn back to God. So you've got a little pun going on there. Okay, somebody read verses 13 through 17.
I can do that.
Okay.
Okay. But the people have not returned to him who struck them, nor have they sought the Lord Almighty. So the Lord will cut off from Israel both head and tail, both palm branch and reed in a single day. The elders and dignitaries are the head. The prophets who teach lies are the tail. Those who guide this people mislead them, and those who are guided are led astray. Therefore, the Lord will take no pleasure in the young men, nor will he pity the fatherless and widows, for everyone is ungodly and wicked. Every mouth speaks folly. Yet for all this, his anger is not turned away. His hand is still upraised.
Okay. So the Hebrew people keep screwing up. God keeps punishing them, but still holds out his hand, hoping, waiting.
I get, yet even so the Lord's anger will not be ended, but his hand will be stretched out to punish.
Ooh, That's a
Yeah,
different,
that's a
That's a
totally,
different
totally different
interpretation.
field.
I had to read it twice to make sure that's what it says. But his hand will still be stretched out to punish.
Huh.
Wow.
Bad boy, bad.
What,
boy.
what Bible are you reading there?
Good news, the correct Bible.
That's not.
That's not very good news for Israel. Oh, dear.
Film at 11.
Yeah.
So he's got praise like this.
So that's how this is.
Like this.
Yeah, yeah. Ooh.
Yeah,
Like,
the
that's
only,
another example of passing the buck.
Yeah. Anyway, that's what this says.
okay,
So,
wow. The only comment I've got out of these few verses was for 16, that the master shall not rejoice over its young men. In biblical poetry, young men and virgins often appear as the object of rejoicing, just as orphans and widows are the proverbial object of merciful concern. But that's not what is happening here. Okay, continuing this fun, I'll read the next set, the verses 18 through 21. Because faithfulness burned like fire, which consumes briar and thorn. It set light to the thickets of the forest, and they swirled as a column of smoke. By the fury of Yahweh armies, the country was scorched. The people became like a fire consuming. One person did not spare his neighbor. He carved to the right, but was hungry, and ate to the left, but was not full. One person eats the flesh of his offspring. Manasseh, Ephraim, Manasseh, all together against Judah. For all this, his anger did not turn. His hand is still stretched out.
And does yours say the same kind of thing there too?
kind of, but a little different. Everywhere in the country, people snatch and eat any bit of food that they can find, but their hunger is never satisfied. They even eat their own children. So that's pretty specific.
Yeah, okay.
But at the very end of 21,
Yet
yet
even,
for all of this, his anger is not turned away.
yeah, yet even so, the Lord's anger is not ended. His hand is still stretched out to punish.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering if it said it there too.
Yeah, I said it there too.
Yeah, because that's not at all.
Yeah.
What version are you reading?
I've got, what is it, New Revised Standard,
Okay,
and mine says his hand is stretched out still, it doesn't, I just assumed it was stretched out in kindness and calling
Yeah.
his children
No,
back.
it's like this. it's
Yeah,
like right
yeah, but
there.
apparently not, apparently it's stretched out to go past.
Yeah, that would be nice to go back to the original.
It would.
Figure out what.
Figure out what.
yeah,
they're
now I
talking
wish I
about
had
there.
I wish I had my Hebrew translation.
I have a feeling if Bernie's says that.
But see, that's not a translation, that's a paraphrase.
Okay.
No, the Good News Bible is an actual translation.
Oh, you're right, I'm thinking about the Living Bible, yeah.
No, the
Yeah,
Good News is
disregard previous comment.
I have a question.
erased.
All through the Old Testament, we see patterns of Jewish people misbehaving. God punishes them. They get right with God. They go along for a while, then they start misbehaving again. God punishes them, and so on and so forth through the whole Old Testament. What is their feeling now regarding bad things that happen? Do they see that? Do they still interpret that as we've broken our covenant and we need to get right with God?
I mean, no idea.
That's a good question, like what's going on in the
Yeah,
Middle East
yeah.
right now, but
Like the Holocaust.
yeah,
Did anybody interpret that as God is punishing us for some reason because we broke the covenant? I don't know.
I don't hear that, but I don't, but it's a good question because I'm not,
Yeah.
connected with. I'm
And
not
there
immersed
would
in
have
that
had to have been a
Jewish
tremendous change in their theology to break that pattern, because that's all through.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Their,
is.
You would think that something like the Holocaust in particular, that there would have been some prophecy between, 0 BC or to 1940 or something. But I don't know if there have been any more prophecies in the Jewish faith since Christ was born.
And if they were, would they be,
It would be a republic probably.
well, but would they? you know, especially once you get into the age of enlightenment and we have science and,
Mhm.
you know, our level of knowledge increases. You know, if Jesus were to walk through the door here, would any of us recognize him? So is the same thing happening with the Jews? Do they have prophets prophesying and being ignored? Yeah, there's no way to know, but that question hit me.
Mm.
Because if we've got them, we're ignoring them.
We just kind of lose touch with the evolution of their faith once Jesus comes along. It's like we go off in this direction. And I don't know what kind of evolution may have taken place in their faith since then.
Well, the only thing I know for sure is that, you know, when the temple was destroyed about 70 AD, that was a big identity crisis for them because they believed God lived in the temple.
There. Mhm.
And their religion was centered around making sacrifices to God.
Mhm.
You made sacrifices at the temple. The temple's not there, so that was the end of the sacrificial system of their religion. So their whole way of worshiping changed at that point, and it became centered around the synagogue and not the temple.
Mhm.
Other than that, I don't know.
Well, here's some food for thought. The Jewish people are, quote, the chosen ones, the chosen people. That doesn't necessarily mean that everything's gonna be hunky-dory and wonderful and perfect. Let's take the situation with Hitler, for instance. Somebody had to play that part. The chosen people played that part. It wasn't just about Hitler's crazy mind and the eradication of the Jews, but it was about the whole world. The sad thing about that whole situation was the length of time that it took the rest of the world to stand up to the evil and define it as evil. I mean, I've said it before, the human race is in the process of defining evil. That's part of what we're here doing. We're figuring out what is evil, what place does it play in the universe, what part does it exist, what part, where and what part does it play in the universe? You know, and so that was a very prominent display of evil. And it took longer than it should have for the rest of the world to stand up and say, this is evil, and we're not accepting it.
But it wasn't just the Jews in the Holocaust. They were all the undesirables, and there were homosexuals and gypsies, and I think the majority were Jews, but there were a lot of people they wanted to get rid of.
Yeah.
And a lot of this stuff that talking about, you know, God punishing and everything, I think it's just a human explanation of the natural order of cause and effect.
Yeah.
You know, let's blame it on God.
Okay. Can somebody read, that finished chapter 9, although this prophecy still continues. Would somebody read the first 4 verses of chapter 10?
How about the easy reading Bible?
Okay,
Easy to read. Just look at those lawmakers who write evil laws and make life hard for people. They are not fair to the poor. They take away the rights of the poor and allow people to steal from widows and orphans. Lawmakers, you will have to explain what you have done. What will you do then? Your destruction is coming from a faraway country. Where will you run for help? Your money and your riches will not help you. You will have to bow down like a prisoner. You will fall down like a dead man. But that will not help you. God will still be angry and ready to punish you. There's that punishment.
There's
the punishment.
It is still upright.
Still-
Right.
still-
Mine,
yeah.
mine is pretty much on par with what you said, except
Mhm.
the first 3 words of chapter 10. You are doomed. It does, it says you are doomed, you make unjust laws that oppress, blah, 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 same thing. But as it starts out, you are doomed.
Now, let's just cut to the chase.
So,
Maybe we should send that to Congress.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so this translation says, that they are subverting the case of poor people and, widows become their spoil and plunder. This is just standard biblical wording for the perversion of justice. These doomed people will be taken into captivity, presumably by Assyrian invaders. Some will fall under the feet of other captives in a forced march of those taken by the conquerors, and others will perish among those killed in battle. So God's using the Assyrians to do that punishing.
yeah,
So,
those are the next 4 verses.
wow, you are doomed.
Don't you know God's always on the side of the winner?
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. That last bit, it was nice, they had little 4 verse sections. This one's really big. How about? Would somebody read, verses 5 through 12?
I'll take it since it's my turn.
Okay,
The Lord said, Assyria, I use Assyria like a club to punish those with whom I am angry. I sent Assyria to attack a godless nation, the people who have made me angry. I sent them to loot and steal and trample the people like dirt in the streets. But the Assyrian emperor has his own violent plans in mind. He is determined to destroy many nations. He boasts, every one of my commanders is a king. I conquer the cities of Kano and Karsemish and the cities of Hamath and Arpad. I conquered Samaria and Damascus. I reached out to punish those kingdoms that worship idols more numerous than you have than those of Jerusalem and Samaria. I have destroyed Samaria and all its idols, and I will do the same with Jerusalem and the images that are worshipped there. End of quote. Still read, right?
one more.
But the Lord says, when I finish with what I'm doing on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, I will punish the emperor of Assyria for all his boasting and all his pride. End of quote.
Okay,
That's the Lord speaking that last.
and this author, again uses the word big-headedness instead of pride.
Obviously, the Assyrian king was not a good winner.
No, and the, my Jewish translation, talks about how God is using Assyria. And Assyria has no clue, of course. They think it's just them being powerful. And because they are, right, makes right, somebody's logging into the wrong Zoom.
That might be someone.
So all of this is a prophecy then? Or is he going through what we're reading about all this that's to come?
I think it's a prophecy, but it's very soon to come,
Okay,
because Assyria is,
except for that child, that wasn't soon to come.
well, no,
So,
Didn't Monty Python make a movie about that? Wasn't it named Brian?
oh, yeah, the life of Brian.
Brian.
I know.
Based on this verse about the child to come.
I didn't think about that, that's hilarious.
Put that in the footnote. What was his name? Brian.
Brian. According to Monty.
okay. We stopped at 12, okay. I'll read the next few verses. I'm going down to 19 here. Because he said, by the might of my hand I have acted, by my wisdom because I have understanding. I have removed the borders of people, I have plundered their treasures. As a mighty one I have subdued inhabitants. My hand reached as into a nest for the wealth of peoples. Like one gathering abandoned eggs, I myself gathered the entire earth. There was not one flapping a wing or opening its mouth and chirping. Does the axe glorify itself over the person who chops with it? Or the saw magnify itself over the person who wields it? As if the club wields the person who lifts it up, as if the mace raised the one who is not made of wood. Therefore the Lord Yahweh armies will send off a wasting disease against his well-fed ones. Beneath its people of honor it will burn, with a burning like the burning of fire. The light of Israel will become fire, its Holy One a flame. It will burn and consume its thorn and its this day. The splendor of its forest and its farmland, it will finish off body and soul. It will be like the wasting away of a sick person. The remains of the trees in its forest will be so few that a boy could write them down. So these words begin God's rejoinder to the boast of the Assyrian king. The king is no more than a tool in God's hand, and the analogies of the axe and the saw make the boasting transparently absurd. This is the language of God's repeated covenantal promises to Abraham in Genesis, but now only a few will survive. Comments, questions? Actually, I think that may be a good place to quit. It's 1:45. Because that was at the end of this little section.
Oh, what kind of downer do you have for us next week?
More of the same. You are doomed. You'll continue to be doomed. But I,
In his sermon today, David makes the argument that, you know, people draw this.
I haven't
distinction
read it. No,
between-
no, 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 don't tell me, don't.
I don't know what she has to
The
say.
New Testament and he says, that's, no, God is loving throughout. And I'm like, I don't feeling it right now.
Kevin, it's like Sunday school, the high school kids. I told the kids that when I asked a question, if they didn't know an answer, it was either God, love, or Jesus.
Right.
Those were the answers, God, love, and Jesus.
If you can remember way back when we were still, in the room across the way, studying the minor prophets, there was a lot of love there.
Yeah.
And one thing I remember from that whole study was that the chosen ones were chosen to take the word of God, the love of God, out to the world. And they just didn't get it for a long time. Yeah, kind of like, we
Yeah.
don't get it either sometimes.
Child with his parents.
Any other questions, comments?
It's hard.
It is.
It's hard to think about that because you hear Jesus on the one hand saying, you know, a rock fell on this guy, so his mother and father must have done something bad. And he says, no, the good falls on the good and the bad the same. So whatever happens is just a circumstance of the world and the situation that we are currently
Cause and effect.
and
Rock fall,
And
one
yet,
you die.
in the Old Testament, it's God did this and God
Yeah.
did that, and so it's
Because that was, that's a case of where we need to remember, we're so technologically farther advanced. That was the only way they could understand.
That was their explanation.
Right, that
For a
was their
lot.
explanation because they didn't understand germs. Yeah, so if you got sick, the only explanation they could say was you're being punished. Well, no, you ate something that was spoiled, so you got sick.
Ate something that was not kosher and you got sick.
Right, and that's probably a whole lot of the laws for kosher was.
Based on keeping you from getting sick.
I mean, Deuteronomy is basically.
Oh,
wash your
sure.
hands.
Yeah.
A whole book dedicated to washing your hands.
Yeah.
They probably had those signs in the bathroom.
Yeah.
too. All employees must wash their hands before they leave.
I was somewhere recently and it wasn't just all employees must wash your hands. Use soap, use warm water, scrub for 20 seconds. I mean, it's as if people don't understand what it means to wash your hands.
But people don't do that.
I know. Yeah, they just put it under the water and walk out. No,
You know, Gary Larson
Yeah.
cartoon did not wash his hands when he leaves the bathroom.